Hi, I'm Whack.
Hey, and I'm Pat, and thanks for joining us for another episode of the Weekly Orbit, the week ending Friday, August 9th. Hey, we're both back in the United States. I had a nice week off. You were touring through Europe. I was in the Netherlands again.
Yeah.
And so it's good to be back. But
I'm
oh
glad
my
to have you.
gosh, what happened to the markets while I was gone?
Yeah, last weekend things got kind of bad, really bad.
I was getting text messages like, oh, have you been watching prices? I said, no. And they're like, don't. I said,
Yeah.
I don't want to. I'm not going to. I'm on
Yeah.
vacation. Let's stay away from that stuff.
We've had to talk about it in the market section, but yeah, it was quite brutal last weekend where everybody was just like, what's going on? What's happening? And it
Right.
very, very much reminded me of like the COVID crash. There was like so much fear in the air, but we can talk about that as well when we talk about the markets. So
Sure.
yeah, there's
Yeah,
definitely big news of the week.
Yeah, so I was in the Netherlands. It's one of my favorite places. And I remember last year before I went, or after I went, I was talking to Tim Jensen. Yeah, he's a node operator, and he's from the Netherlands.
Yeah.
And I said, I love your cities. They're so walkable. They're beautiful. You can ride your bike everywhere. He says, yeah. But have you tasted our water? It's the best in Europe. And I said, I did taste it. Don't recall if it was bad or it wasn't bad because I would have remembered. But I was like, I guess you just take it for granted. Your cities are so nice.
Yeah.
So this time I paid attention to the tap water and I thought, actually, the tap water is pretty good here. So,
pretty
it was a good trip and, glad to be back. So let's talk about the markets.
Do we have to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we start, so I was listening to Scott Galloway. He's a professor at NYU. He's got a podcast, and he's very successful. And he's been harping about the boomer generation always gets bailouts, and it kind of steals from the younger people. And he said when markets correct, it's a good thing because it flushes out the waste or the inefficiencies, and then allows people to come in and buy at lower prices. And he says, basically he attributes his financial security that he has now to the 2008 financial crisis. He says because you go in and buy Netflix for $5, right, which is now trading at like $600. Just as an example. So when these things happen in the short run, it's like, oh man, this sucks. But if you're trying to build generational wealth, corrections are a good time. If you really believe, obviously you have to believe in the asset you're buying, but it could be just getting something on sale.
Yeah.
And that's just my opening. As you can see, we're looking at Ethereum. It's up 8% over the last 24 hours. So
Can you just
starting to
scroll
recover
down a tiny bit for us to see the little bar?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, okay.
So on the week,
Yeah.
on the week we're down. ETH is down 17%.
Yeah.
But it looked like at some point, I was listening to Bankless earlier, and on some exchanges we touched below 2,000 downwind.
I didn't see that anywhere. The lowest I saw was 2,111 on Binance, and that was really low. I think on that Sunday night it dropped 25% in a matter of minutes. Pretty much, it felt like it just was in free fall. That just before that, where your cursor is, that vertical drop was really, really steep. And I think that one right there, that happened over the course of a few minutes. Pretty much like within an hour, it just like the floor fell out completely. It was really like scary to watch the markets to that point. And it was okay. So I say scary, like objectively it's scary, but for me subjectively, I was like, oh, it's just another day in crypto. Like I've been around for a while, right? Like, so I think there's a sense of perspective that comes with that. And like, I've seen these crashes many times, and I've seen crypto go up many times after those crashes. And I think it affords you a perspective that, people who are newer to the markets don't have. I think that's one of the reasons why I'm like so chill, relatively speaking, about the RPL price as well. Like, my portfolio in 2018 was down 90%. From my investment that I made. I pretty much got in at the peak of the bull market in 2017, 2018. And over the course of that year and for the year after that, it was pretty much down 90%. So like, that's tough, right? Like, it's really tough to experience that. But the thing is that, if you believe in the assets that you're invested in, then this becomes a buying opportunity. And the thing that I was complaining about more than anything else was like, I don't have fiat to buy. Like this was the buying opportunity, right? Like, RPL below $10, it hit like $9.20, $9.50, something along those numbers. That's really, really cheap RPL. And on the ratio as well, like, not financial advice or anything, but like, that was the time to be stacking up, if you believe in the project. And then with ETH, like everyone believes in ETH, kind of, down to $2,100, like, back that truck up, like, load it up, you know what I mean? Like, but that comes with perspective, and the perspective comes with time. And
Yeah.
like I'm saying, like, in the beginning, it felt very much like the COVID crash. And in the COVID crash, I was still new to crypto, relatively speaking. Like, I'd only been in for like 2 or 3 years at the time, two and a half years or so. And it was that was a bad drop. It was like 50%, and people were saying ETH is gonna go back down to single digits. Like, when it was in the 90s, it was gonna go back to like $8 or something. That was the low from the DAO hack. It was gonna retest that low type of thing. The TA jargon that those guys come out with, and I got scared, right? I was like, oh no, I had money, I had cash set waiting to buy crypto, and I got scared. And I was like, if this is going to go down another 90%, like, I'm going to wait. And I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited. And I ended up actually buying back at like $290 instead of at $80, which I was watching the markets. Like, before that, I'd bought, a chunk at $120 and I'd bought at $200. So I did make those buys in those prices, but the big buy that I had money waiting for, I got scared. And like, if I had money now, I would have been buying on Sunday night. And that's kind of the perspective that I developed over those years. Like, 7 years in crypto, like, changes your perspective a lot, right? And being as into the markets as we are, like, you see those patterns, and I think it gives you a different idea. And like, what's happened since then, right? Like, the prices have recovered quite steeply. ETH is up 30% pretty much. RPL is up like 30-40% pretty much. Those bounces have happened, but they were painful. On Sunday night, it was scary because, people are thinking Japan's collapsing. People are thinking the US is definitely going to a hard landing, into a recession. It was a scary point. But like, if you look at the 7 days, right? Like, RPL is down 14%. It's actually up against ETH in that time. So like, small mercies and all that. At one point, it was actually trading above 0.05 again. It was kind of short-lived there yesterday or the day before. But RPL's bounced back decently, as decently as you can say, right? Like, those numbers are really bad. That 1 year number, especially down 54%, is quite hard to stomach, I think, for people still. But that's where we've lost so much against ETH. Like, ETH is up 40%, RPL's down 50%. It's a big gap. But if you look at the wider market, like, I talked about rocket fuel as well. Like, a whole lot of tokens got pummeled really hard. And like, we look at Lido, right? And look, Lido's right here, and people are like, Lido's the biggest staking token there is. It's huge protocol. It's the biggest on Ethereum in terms of TVL. I think maybe second to Eigenlayer now, or there. No, it's still first, ahead of Eigenlayer still. And look, it's down 27% on the 7 days, and it's down like 39% on the year. So that just tells you that, the price of the token is something that changes, and you just got to be adapted to that. With Lido, it's a little bit more complicated because they've had their token supply was locked, and then it's become more available over time. So their market cap has actually gone up considerably. The token price hasn't, which is where that disconnect happens. With RPL, like, all the tokens are liquid, so we've just gotten slaughtered in price. But there's some more complexities and nuances to the LDO tokens price. But the reality is, like, if you have bought these tokens, you don't care about the market cap. You care about the token price, and they've gotten smashed big time. So, hopefully this is the end. With Fed rate cuts potentially coming in September, it means we might have a few more months of choppiness going into the end of the year. But hopefully 2025 will be set up for a good year for crypto. And now people are saying the Fed is going to cut 5 times before the end of the year, which would be astonishing, really, considering where we were just a few weeks ago. But I've just rambled a whole lot about prices there. Pat, why don't you tell us what you're thinking?
I saw, one old saying is, bull markets, you take the escalator up and the elevator down. And if you think about it, that's the pattern we've had. We've had a nice escalator up. We were at a year ago we were at $1,500 ETH, and then we are up to almost 4,000.
Yeah.
So let's say mid 3,000s, and then boom, we took an elevator down to like 2,100 within a few days, and then it's bounced. If you recall, WAC, at the end of 2022, it started at 2020. They say December 22, I think it was, when we started the bear. It was just a slow, steady decline down. We were in the 3,000s, and then they were in the 2,000s, and then they were in the 1,000s for ETH price, and that's like a sign of like, hey, that's kind of a typical bear market where things just kind of decline steadily, and then kind of just trade within a range. What we've seen the last year is a steady increase up on that escalator, and then boom, you get these corrections where it's like it's panicky, it's sudden, and it's steep. And so I guess where I don't panic because I recognize this pattern. I've seen this before, and it's a kind of a buy-in opportunity. Again, we're looking at if you look at macro, probably some rate cuts come in, which means more money into the markets and
risk.
And then the other thing is it's 5% savings. I mean, we don't have to make this a macro podcast, but you can take your savings and earn 5% in a money market. There's less incentive to take risk because I'm getting 5%. I'm not doing anything. Whereas if it starts down to 4%, 3%, 2%, 1%, now say you're getting 2% on your savings, you're like, I need to take a little risk here to get a little better return.
Yeah.
And so, that's probably what we're seeing in the next, year is some lower interest rates. And if that's the case, people are going to start moving money. I saw Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway sitting on almost $300 billion in cash. And why not? 5% on $300 billion is a good return. But if that starts going down, you see the big people start to invest more in some assets. So,
yeah. And that's
anyways,
we've got, it's never straight up and to the right? Like it's always jagged. And when you're looking at it day to day, it can feel really violent at times. But when you zoom out a little bit, it just kind of becomes noise. Like these dips become noise. And that is not, of course, to say that, what's happened before will happen again. There's no guarantee, of course, that we're going to get a crypto bull market and all that good stuff. So please invest wisely. Like this is not investment advice, financial advice, any of that kind of stuff. But looking at those patterns, like it's happened many times, right? And it looks like it's happening again. And you don't know for sure, but it's getting set up that way, basically. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think it's good to listen to some folks who've been through several cycles of this. DC Investor, Anthony Sassano, even you, WAC, right? Where you've seen patterns, you've had those nights where your stomach was churning. The key is we talked about don't blow yourself up, right? Stay away from leverage if you can.
Yeah,
because you can just sit this stuff out. Like I was having dinner Sunday night in Amsterdam. I didn't have a worry. I didn't even know this was going on. But I didn't have to sit there and watch because I don't have any leverage. I don't have to worry about, oh my God, I'm going to get liquidated.
Exactly.
So just be careful if you're doing that.
And sadly, there's a lot of stories going around of people who have been liquidated, like looking on crypto Twitter, ETH Finance, even in Discord. Like there are a few people who had significant amounts of their assets in the leveraged position, and their leverage was so tight that the wick on ETH got them liquidated, which means they lost either a big chunk of their assets, a significant amount, all of it, maybe or some of it even. Like you don't want to lose it, right? Like that's what you don't want to do. So, yeah.
Right. Well, hopefully we'll see better things. There's some talk that Jump Capital, they've been dumping their ETH. It looks like they may have been leveraged up somewhere because they were kind of panic selling. They've got and then you got we'll get into it. Grayscale with their ETH trust that's been selling down.
Yeah.
So this is a Rocket Pool podcast, so let's talk a little bit about Rocket Pool.
Yeah.
We haven't checked the deposit pool in a while. The limit is 18,000. Right now we're about 25,000, which sounds, it's definitely overweighted, but it was over 30,000 earlier this week.
Yeah.
And so we've made some progress. I was we could take a look at the what's going on with mini pools, and I believe we had Marko Barko has been bond reducing, which has been sucking up hundreds of ETH out of the deposit pool. Could
Yep.
you tell our listeners more about what's going on here?
Yeah, so Marko Barko and Patricio Walter are, well, Patricio, everyone knows as, the face of POAP, and he's the biggest holder of the RPL token as well. And he had his RPL sat there, it was doing nothing. I don't know the full details of who approached whom, but Marko and Patricio got married. They had a splitter contract set up as their withdrawal address, and Marko provided the ETH, Patricio provided the RPL. They got married, and I think they had 1,500 validators between them, maybe more than that even. One of the things that was curious though was, even with Atlas, they never reduced their bond, right? So they kept it at 16 ETH validators. They never brought them down to the 8 ETH validators, which is what we really wanted. The community really wanted that. With RPIP 30 as well, then we changed the curve of rewards to really incentivize moving to 8 ETH validators. But even through that, they didn't move. So it was kind of surprising, why they didn't do that and what was going on there. I didn't understand it. So it's really funny because Ramana had a dream a few days ago that Marko started bond reducing, and Nashwan, was like, wait, where did you see this? Like, what's going on? And we figured out he'd had a dream about it, and then the very next day, Marko started bond reducing. So it's like, what happened there? It was actually a really funny coincidence. But the two theories that I have is either that Marko watched Rocket Fuel when I talked about it, and then was like, oh yeah, I should bond reduce, or maybe he saw it trading. Or the second theory is that Ramana is actually Marko Barko, and he was like just kind of projecting his ideas that he was having about bond reducing. But the thing is, the deposit pool, like you said, was getting really bloated. It was above 30,000. It's like, oh, like this is not looking good because it's a drag on our ETH APR, right? Just the idle ETH sat there. So Marko actually coming in and reducing bonds on those, hundreds of validators so far, hopefully into thousands of validators, will actually have a nice impact on revenue for himself, and which is good, and for Patricio, which is good, but also for Rocket Pool, the protocol, increasing the TBL by thousands of ETH is amazing to see, and we love to see that. So it just makes you think, right? Looking at this, it made me realize just how limited ability we have of growing Rocket Pool in terms of TVL through staking with RPL. You need 1 million RPL basically to bring on 9,000 validators right now, or something along those kind of lines. I think maybe 2,000 validators, which is nothing, right? Because the ratio is so low, you need so much of it to collateralize. It just becomes this huge hindrance to how much you can grow. But hey, we've got a whole lot of stuff going on which will help us grow with that. So yeah, Marko's doing this. The deposit pool's looking a little bit better. Hopefully, he'll reduce the bond for all of his validators, and then it will look better still. But if we can get back below that 18,000 amount, then the Rocket ARB comes back onto the table for node operators, right, and other things as well. So hopefully it will. Hopefully this is a sign that Rocket Pool's TVL has bottomed, and hopefully we can start increasing our TVL from here.
Yeah, and it's a good time to bond reduce because gas on the mainnet is so cheap.
It's so cheap, yeah. The
right?
one go basically, it's pretty much free to bond reduce, and I think it will take 2 days of rewards basically to cover all the gas costs. So I remember, when Atlas launched, gas prices were in the 30s or 40s, and at that point, there was a queue, and it could be, for some people, depending on how they were reducing their bonds, it could take months of node operation to become profitable again. But right now at one go, I think it's a couple of days basically of earnings. Increased earnings will cover the gas cost, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it looks like we're about maybe 3/4
this data is wrong.
Validator. Is this wrong?
Yeah, this is wrong. Right, Rocket Scan has a few things that are broken on it right now, and that table is wrong. We don't have 35,000 validators. we're at 24,000.
Oh yeah, I was looking at that small.
Yeah, so this is broken. Yeah, so you can't really make too many inferences from that. If you go to the Discord, and I think the TVL bot there does work, so you can get a better idea from there. But that's okay. We'll try to get that number for next week.
Sure. So one of the big news stories this week has been finally we have a vote on the Retokenomics of Rocket Pool. RPIC 49, I believe it is the main one. And I have a few questions about this, but why don't you just give us a broad overview of what are we voting on here for RPIP 49?
Yeah, so basically Rocket Pool is going from Rocket Pool 1.0 to Rocket Pool 2.0, is pretty much like completely reworking how you stake with Rocket Pool. Like right now, you need ETH and Rocket Pool, and you need to be the node operator yourself. With the rework, you are basically breaking down those relationships in ways that make it more flexible for you. You can stake with ETH only. If you stake with RPL, you get better bonuses. There's a whole lot of other things that are going into this. In fact, RPIP 49 is just like the forward-facing RPIP of this. There are actually like 7 or 8 RPIPs nestled under that encompass all the different changes that are happening. So it's a very, very robust change. It's changing like the whole protocol, like the economic incentives, the dynamics, like the whole lot of it is changing. Now, this has been 9 months in the making, basically since 10 months in the making since November last year. So we've been working on it as a community for pretty much a year, and now we are at the point where we have not even still yet, we still don't have a finished product that we put into the community. There's still some questions that will need to be answered and worked on in the next couple of months, but those will come up for vote again later. But right now, the idea was we have a current way that we're doing things. We have this proposal from the community that has a lot of support, and we have 2 other proposals that are less fleshed out. One from Mike from 1KX and one from Evan, IB1 Gymnast. And with these proposals, what does the community want to go forward with? So this vote basically is to say, do you want to go forward with RPIP 49 as the new tokenomics for Rocket Pool? And if you do, then this is what's going to happen. This is what we're going to adopt. However, if you don't want to go ahead with this, then we're going to vote again in 1 month's time, where you will get the choice of voting for the current tokenomics. You'll get a choice of voting for 1KX's tokenomics suggestions, or you'll get the choice of voting for Evan's tokenomics suggestions. Yeah, as you can see here, there's 7 RPIPs basically nestled into this one RPIP, and then there's a whole bunch of other questions that will need to be answered later as well. So you can see, but this vote went live a couple of days ago, and within I think 16 hours it had already hit quorum, and right now there's 1 person voting against it, and that is a joke vote against it, like from Snow. So there's 90 votes against, but like that isn't really, like, that's not real. It's just a joke vote, but there's 19,000 votes in favor of it, and this is it. Like we've had a whole lot of votes from basically all the big delegates have voted in favor of this, and it seems like it's going to be the path that the community is choosing to go forward with. So this is an extremely exciting time for Rocket Pool. The only thing that I have a complaint about is that I want this to happen like today, and it might still be some months away. So that's the only disappointing part, but the rest of it is amazing.
So here's a question.
After
Houston, you can delegate for on-chain voting.
Yeah.
And if you've done that already, are you still able to vote on the snapshot?
I'm not sure of the full technicalities of it, but I think you can override, as far as I understand, if you are a node operator, you can attach your node wallet to, or your signaling address, you can attach it to snapshot here, and you can override the vote of your person that you delegated to.
Yeah, because I checked my node this morning and it said, I'm delegated, but then it says you do not have a signaling address.
You had to do that beforehand. You had to set up your signaling address.
So you got to set up a signaling address in order to vote on the snapshot?
Yeah. So we were expecting there to be like some of these issues coming up with this vote, because this is the first vote that's happened after Houston, and I think there was still some confusion for people about setting up their voting properly. And sadly, the case is that some people missed out on voting on this, either because they didn't, complete their delegation properly with setting up a signaling address themselves, or they just didn't initialize their vote in time, and then they saw the vote went live, and then they tried to do it, and then they missed it already, because there's a snapshot taken of voting power at that block, and if you don't have any voting power at that block, then you can't vote on this, even if you initialize the vote afterwards.
So for the delegating, that only pertains to on-chain voting. So if you delegated, say someone delegated to WAC,
Yeah.
would that only pertain to an
No, that works
upcoming
for this as
on-chain?
well. No, that's for
It
this as well.
does.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you don't have a signaling address set up, that means you can't override
Override.
your
Yeah.
delegate. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you've already delegated to somebody, then that person's going to vote on your behalf on this snapshot,
Yeah.
RPIP 49.
Yeah. And your vote power is initialized and it's all set up, so you're all good. But the thing is that, you got to make sure that then the person you delegated to votes. And I think most of the big delegates have voted already. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I imagine. And we're at 19. The quorum was 14,000, and we're already
Yeah,
at
we
19,000.
blasted through it. Yeah.
So this will the votes typically go for what, 2 weeks or 10 days? Is it 10 days?
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So it's a major milestone. I think the genesis. We'll say the genesis date was your curse-laden rant back in November, as I recall. Like, we got to do something. We got to get off our laurels. Remember that? I'm sure you do.
I do remember that. There was still discussion. Like people like Noshua and others, had brought up some of these points beforehand. So it wasn't, me. I wasn't just
Right. Yeah.
made it up myself, right? Like, this was built on the back of other people. But I think the Lido CSM announcement was a catalyst that kind of lit the spark for everyone. And maybe, I was just a small part of that. Like, I don't claim too much credit, but yeah, that was, I think that was me at my most passionate on Rocket Fuel
Yeah.
in the 2 years that I've been doing it. So yeah.
I'm glad you did it.
Yeah.
There's a couple other votes here. Let's go through quickly. There's RPIP 57, which is no distributor user fund unbundling. Just briefly, what is that about?
So a couple of these are ways of basically limiting the powers of the ODAO. So, that's something that we want to do going forwards is we want the ODAO to have less power, have less ability. But this one, the one that you actually just did with the user fund unbundling was what happens is that some big node operators can kind of get their rewards and they just sit on them and they don't do anything with them. And what ends up happening is that they can kind of manipulate the market a little bit with when they choose to claim their rewards. I don't fully understand the details, but it can impact the RETH price a little bit. So what this one will do will let anyone just claim it for them. So it's like tough luck. Like, we don't want you sitting on that ETH. Like, let's make it useful again and let's get it to do stuff. So they kind of push it. You can push it on someone else. So that's one of them. And the other two are just limits to the ODAO. With how they can enforce penalties and how they can change the the balance guardrail. So there's some limitations to that as well, because there was a big controversy a couple of years ago where people were kind of criticizing the ODAO. We don't really talk about the ODAO anymore because they don't get paid as much as they used to. So people just kind of forgot they existed. But the reality is that they still have power on the protocol. And by limiting that protocol, power where we can, I think is really helpful and good. And these are two ways of doing that. And I'm sure there'll be others coming as well in the future upgrades.
Just kind of more in general, like decentralizing Rocket Pool, right?
Yeah.
Taking away the power from the ODAO, giving it to the PDAO or the community.
Yeah, it's just with this, is the ODAO still has the power, but it's just how they use that power is what's changing. So they won't be able to, go off track basically and just go rogue. Like that will be curtailed a little bit. It'll just slow them down, not take their powers away completely.
Cool. And then the last thing we're going to cover today is there's been discussion about ETH-only validators. And I think the genesis for this is we understand that Saturn is going to take a while, or probably Saturn 1. It's going to be split up into two things. Saturn 1, maybe it could be like 9 months away. I don't know.
Maybe even a year.
But, yeah, maybe. Who knows? These things, it's it's software, right? So, but it's like, what can we do? Is there anything we could do in the meantime that we can tweak without having to do smart code changes and smart contract changes? So one thing was like, well, could we do ETH only? And apparently we can, and there's been back and forth discussion. It seemed to me initially the team was like a little hesitant about doing that due to the effect on RPL, I think, and other things. But it seems like there's been a back and forth discussion It looks like there's a path forward, from my understanding, that we could do this. Could you just give us an overview of where we're at on ETH-only validators, and then what would be the time frame for a rollout of that?
Yeah. So the thing to be clear is, like, Saturn 1 is, or Saturn as a whole, like, RPIT 49 is almost guaranteed at this point to be approved by the community. Like, that's the anchor to this whole discussion, right? And what that allows is for ETH-only validators, but it also allows for value capture mechanisms to the RPL token itself. Now, Rocket Pool is stagnant. Rocket Pool is not growing. Rocket Pool is shrinking, actually. Like, over the last year, basically, like, we've been flat to down recently. And the idea is that, Lido CSM goes live in October or November of this year. And Rocket Pool's Saturn is not potentially going live until Q1 of 25, pretty much is the best case scenario. Q2 may be more realistic. That gives Lido a big head start again on getting those validators, right? And people using it instead of using Rocket Pool. So the idea came up, and one of the main people who's like championing this idea is actually Hululo, and he's gone back and forth a lot and talked to everyone in the community. And I think what's happened is more and more people have kind of warmed up to this idea that, the community wants ETH-only validators. They've voted for ETH-only validators. So is there a way to get them ETH-only validators before Saturn? And what can we do to make it so, the RPL price doesn't tank, and that we get node operators and protocol growth, right? So this has to be kind of framed in conjunction with the fact that we have NodeSet and RocketLend, two protocols, built on top of Rocket Pool, that are potentially going live in the next, 3 to 6 months, with varying amounts of time between that. So there's like still discussion: is this necessary? Like, can we get those Legos, those layer 2s to do the lifting? But then there's the discussion, like, should we depend on those? And if they're not successful, then how's that going to impact Rocket Pool? Like, should we do both at the same time? So Nick actually from NodeSet, replied to this idea saying this will kill NodeSet, basically, right? I think he had an idea that, it would work in a certain way. And then people have been like using those, back and forth. Like, Langer said this will impact RPL, like, this will impact the protocol in a negative way. And then as the idea has been refined and developed, I think more and more people are now starting to see that, hey, actually this might be viable. And the TVL growth that we'll get will be potentially, significant, like very, very significant. And with all that together, it looks like, one of the things that we have to understand is, like, this is nowhere near the finished product, right? Like, this is still in the discussion phase. This is still in the research phase. There's a whole lot that needs to happen to get this to be real. Now, you asked, when could this happen, right? So let's say this week there's an RPIP written, a draft RPIP, and then, that will go to the forum and people will talk about it and debate it. And then there'll be a sentiment poll that will run for a week, maybe 2 weeks. And then, so let's say 2 weeks of forum discussion, 2 weeks of vote. Then the actual implementation can happen fairly quickly, but maybe not. And the reason why I'm saying that is because there's certain parameters that are just going to happen off-chain. Like, the reward tree calculation will be changing. That's off-chain, that's not on-chain. With on-chain, there are a couple of parameter changes that need to happen to the protocol, and there might be the case that we need some very, very minor tweaks to the smart contracts. With that happening, then it has to be audited, right? And that is still, we're trying to figure out if that's going to happen or be needed or not. So the best case scenario is, a month of discussion and vote, then a formal vote for another 2 weeks, and then the tree generation and implementation. The best case scenario is that happens in 3 months, that we'll have ETH-only validators. However, it might be the case that it might be, a month more than that potentially, but in 4 months this could be implemented. So there's still discussion going on, like I said, and this is still not, a totally refined idea, but the more I'm reading about it, the more optimistic I am about it. And I think that, it will help Rocket Pool a lot. And the main thing that, we have to pay attention to is, like, this is not going to like people say, oh, it's going to make RPL useless, blah blah blah. But the main thing that we have to remember is like we can lock in that TVL from now. Like there was this idea, right? Like when Saturn 1 goes live, or whatever value capture method we use for RPL is not going to be that significant, right? Like our TVL is so low. We're only going to be like, if we use the burn method, we might be burning 1,000 ETH a year, which is insignificant. And
Right.
we just don't have the TVL, and by the time we build up the TVL, that's when the burn will become impactful, and it might take a year to do that, potentially, like whatever. Like this was a kind of an idea that was kind of going around, the anti RPIP 49 crew kind of was pushing this idea a little bit, like the value capture mechanism will be useless. However, what we could do is we could start building the TVL now, and then when
Yeah.
Saturn goes live, the value capture mechanism will be like full guns blazing from day one, pretty much, and that I think then will be a much more significant impact right then as well. So there's a lot still happening, and this is far from fully decided. Like we literally don't even have an RPIP draft yet, or a forum post yet, so there's a lot to go for this yet. But the more I think about it, like the more I'm warming to the idea. And the fact is that with some of the tweaks that they've suggested, like it keeps NodeSet and Rocket continuing to be profitable, which is really cool. So
That's really good.
hopefully we can thread all those different needles at the same time, and hopefully like
Also,
Rocket
I think it's
will
good.
be, yeah.
It will help stop the bleeding of TVL. Number two, it'll create buzz too. It's something like people talk about. Hey, you invest, you stake your ETH with Rocket Pool. The reason you want to do Rocket Pool is because your rewards are higher than if you just do solo staking. So we got, if you create buzz, you increase TVL, it kind of gives us, and then we'll have hopefully NodeSet, come along in the next 3 to 6 months, just to create some buzz about Rocket Pool until we can get Saturn on board, So that's what I'm hopeful for.
I hope so too.
You got a win for this week?
Yeah, my win is just being back home, actually. Back to my routine. Like, this week is the first week in many, many weeks where I've actually recorded Rocket Fuel every day. I've actually been spending more time in the Discord every day, and just being back in the community, right? Like, when I was away, it was the minimum viable rocket fuel, basically. And I wasn't going as deep as I could have in certain topics. I missed topics that I should have, been paying more attention to. I just couldn't, right? I was on vacation, and I was working, but way less than usual. And just being back home, it's nice to be back in your own routines and everything, and getting 5 episodes of Rocket Fuel out in a week feels like an alien idea right now. So that's my win for the week.
My win is DeFi again stood up in a stress test environment.
Yeah.
We're talking about Sunday night, how everything's crashing, people are getting liquidated. I don't have the tweet, but someone was posting, I think maybe it was Monday, where all the major traditional finance exchanges were down. Vanguard, Charles Schwab, Robinhood, you name, like all the big ones, Fidelity.
Yeah.
They all weren't working because you had, when the markets went down, 5% or something? I don't know. But meanwhile, DeFi just, works flawlessly, just like it has in the past when we've had these, flurry of liquidations and panic. Just works just fine. So that's my win. DeFi again shows that it's just a superior system compared to TradFi, which just breaks.
Absolutely.
You get some traffic and all of a sudden it just breaks, doesn't work. Can you imagine you're trying to trade and I can't log in.
One thing that
Sorry.
happened though is gas hit 600 to 650 on mainnet. The gas was expensive, but it didn't break, right? Like you could do what you needed, you just had to pay for it. And there was that 12 or 24-hour period there where it was expensive, but everything was
That's
still
a free
working.
market working, right? It's like, hey, I'll pay whatever I need to do to make sure I don't lose, hundreds, thousands, millions of dollars, whatever it might
Absolutely.
be. I'll just pay it. I got to do it. Whereas if you're in the TradFi world, you don't even have that opportunity.
No.
Because you go to log in, it doesn't work. Or, sorry.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's why when DeFi again shows it's awesome, it works. even under the most stressful conditions, you just got to pay for it if you need it. So,
Yep. That's what it is.
anyways, thanks for listening and watching. That concludes this week's episode. We'll be back next week with our normal show again. Until then, Whack, we'll see you, and hopefully we'll have an up market to talk about next Friday.
Absolutely, yeah. Hopefully it'll be a good week.
Okay, take care,
Bye,
everyone. Bye-bye.